Welcome back to Munchausen's Proxy, and this is the double dose of the Ark spoiler review that I owe you from last week and this week, or rather last week and the week before. We started with the last episode having the ship almost melt down, and it was saved by the suicide mission of Trent. And also we had Team Nerd come up with a detector for what hit them in episode 1. And at the end of the episode, we had Lane the asshole discover that William Trust is on board in a cryopod. This week starts with a staff meeting 3.2 months after last episode. We see during the meeting that Doc is falling fast into her amphetamine addiction that she took up when she was having to stay up to handle all of the injuries from their accident, quote unquote. In the meeting, Ava the engineer reveals yet another stellar writing plot point by telling everybody that they're almost out of gas. They have about 2 weeks of uranium fuel left in the engines, and so they decide to divert to a nearby planet that they sense uranium on. And then at the end of the meeting, after everything's decided, Angus asks them all to the mess hall, where he gives them a treat of the first small harvest from their garden dome. And Bryce is not overly impressed by this. He pops his tomato in his mouth and he leaves. And as he leaves, his hidden medical condition that he's been trying to avoid the doc about is suddenly revealed as he collapses unconscious as he's leaving the mess. He later finds out Ava, the engineer, picked him up and put him in his bunk to sort of cover things up for him. After the meeting, Felix confronts the doc about her issues. And later, he hides all the pills, and she agrees to detox from her amphetamines. Garnett and Lane have a meeting in her quarters, and they get a little tipsy from a bottle she found in the captain's quarters. And she finally reveals the piece of information that he's been so suspicious of her for. She's on the ship because the guy who created her, remember she's a clone, was the head physician for the Ark and was one of those who died in the first episode. And that he was the closest thing she had to a father. Well, as they have a little more chit-chat and share feelings and several more glasses of scotch, they agree to no more secrets between them. But now Lane feels guilty because he has one more secret he is not telling her. And that is the fact that he knows there's a secret room where William Trust and his wife are locked up in hibernation. Cut to Ava, and she comes into the bridge and announces that they're going to run out of gas way before they get to this planet they sense has uranium. But of course, Alicia, the annoying girl, comes up with the solution, and it's pretty much ripped straight from the movie The Martian. And they plan to use a gravity assist by slingshotting around a nearby binary star and use their solar sails on their way past. And it works. However, they wind up going faster than anticipated, and the solar sail gets damaged, or one of them gets damaged, when the star throws off a solar flare. Now, the radiation outside of the ship is high enough that nobody is going to survive it. So Garnett decides to volunteer to do it because her clone DNA has been augmented to allow her to withstand higher levels of radiation. So she goes out and she fixes it, but she is severely sunburned and barely makes it back to the ship, and they get her to med bay, and she's basically confined to med bay for a chunk of this episode. And then we have Lane confiding in Kat, the therapist, about trust, but she about has a kitten and tells him that he can't tell anybody else, especially Garnett, because half the people on the ship hate the man because they lost friends and family due to some of his actions. And he winds up wondering why Trust is on the ship, and goes back and looks at the compartment he's in and discovers another compartment inside that compartment that is filled with animal specimens and plant specimens from Earth. So the Ark is literally an Ark. Now, as they approach the planet, the nerd alert pings that the element that hit them in the first episode is also present on this planet. And so they have a lively debate over whether or not they should approach the planet. And basically necessity decides, because if they don't go to the planet and get the uranium, they're basically going to stall out. Well short of Proxima. So Bryce comes up with the solution of scouting ahead in their shuttlecraft. And Ava insists on going with him, and since Garnett's in the med bay, Lane's in charge, and as expected, he's a terrible leader. And they just bowl right over him, and both the head engineer and the only navigator go off in this tiny ship in the middle of nowhere towards a planet that has the element that hit them. And Ava wants to go because she's worried about Bryce passing out, which he actually does on the way there. Now, when the shuttle gets close to the planet, they don't find any readings of uranium or the element. And the brain trust back at the ship decide that it's probably a line of sight issue. And so Bryce and Ava fly around the planet, and lo and behold, another Ark is there. Ark 3. And that's how they end episode 6. Episode 6 shows the upward progression that the Ark has shown ever since episode 1. Annoying girl is less annoying. Lane the asshole is less annoying. The characters are tighter. We're getting to know them, and the actors are getting more comfortable in the character's skin, and the story is progressing fairly nicely. But I do have issues with some of the writing. Now, unlike some other shows where it's mostly the writing comes out as bad in the dialogue. Dialogue in this show is pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. The problem is they seem to have no ability to not be derivative. I mentioned the ripoff of The Martian and the gravity assist thing. But they also have no creativity as far as the disaster of the week for the ship. Now, I understand ships have problems, and if you're away from your home base and you're all alone, you're going to have even more problems. But the creativity is starting to lag. Last week they had a engine meltdown. This week they are running out of gas. Previous episodes they were running out of food and water. And they're running out of medicines, and on and on and on. And I know a lot of that is plausible, but it wouldn't be dribbled out the way it has been. Ava would not wait until they are 2 weeks shy of running out of gas to let the rest of the command council know. That's something that would be discussed a little bit earlier. But overall, I'm liking this show. It's well done. The effects are a little subpar, but this is the Syfy channel. I don't know what we could expect more from them. they're about as good as you can expect from an operation as low tier as the Syfy channel. The actors are getting better. Some of them I've liked from the start. Others have grown on me. And the overall story is an interesting one. And it's being done in a well enough fashion that it's not boring, and it keeps the story moving along episode by episode. So episode 6 keeps that going, and now we get into episode 7. Episode 7 pretty much picks up right where episode 6 left off. Now that they have found Arc 3 and they realize that both the unknown element and the uranium are coming from the ship, they do the obvious. They are going to cannibalize the Arc 3 for all the supplies they need, the fuel they need, and anything else they can find out about what happened to Arc 3, since all of the data about what happened to Arc 1 was destroyed in their accident, quote unquote. So they send a party over, and they immediately find the ship just littered with bodies. And I had a problem with the way this was done, because their answer for why the bodies were asphyxiated was a decompression from them being hit. The interior of the ship is not messed up enough, and the bodies are sort of in a natural position of where they would have fallen when the air supposedly escaped the ship before the airlock doors could come down and save the rest of them. And the difference between Arc 1 and Arc 3 is Arc 3 has crew quarters and not hibernation pods, which is why the entire crew seems to be dead. And of course, we know that's not going to be the case. Otherwise, this would be a very boring episode. So they get on to the Arc 3 and start rounding up the supplies they need, the medicines, the food, the water, the fuel, whatever they need. And they also try and get into the computers to figure out what happened to the Arc 3. But they find out that the computers for Arc 3 are locked down, and they don't have the codes to get into the sections of the computer that they would really like to get into. Sections that might tell them why Arc 3 is both at the head of them and on the same trajectory to Proxima 3 that they would be on. Arc 3 was scheduled to go somewhere else. The crew of Arc 1 is disquieted by the appearance of Arc 3. Some people knew people who should have been crew on Arc 3, and something is a bad sign of the conditions Earth is in. And that'll come to a head after they find what they find on Arc 3. While they're scavenging, they do find corrupted video files that they eventually piece together. And they also find a young woman who survived and who has a friend who survived. And I immediately smell seafood with this chick. Apparently, according to her, what happened was after they got hit and everybody got killed who died naturally, the handful or so members of the engineering staff decided to go a little Lord of the Flies on the rest of the crew, which is how some of the crew members who are dead look like they have been murdered. And her and this other dude didn't go along with that, supposedly. And they hid themselves in the mess hall. And she had left him there to go see who's moving around the ship. The story doesn't make any sense, just go with it. They go back to the mess hall, they find him rushing back to Arc 1, and he dies on the operating table. Now, back on Arc 3, one of the people that they find among the dead crew is Felix's husband. And this naturally tears him up because they've also got a daughter. And the daughter doesn't seem to be on Arc 3. And he thinks that his husband would never leave their daughter back on Earth. The girl eventually gets around to telling them that Arc 3 got diverted to Proxima because the folks back on Earth figured it would be best to send the Arc 3 to beat Arc 1 to Proxima because they now have an FTL drive, faster than the light drive, that would get them there in about 9 months. And she informs Felix that, she informs Felix later that his daughter was killed by a stray bullet. And like I said, that tears him up a lot. She also tells the rest of the crew the bad news that basically Earth went to hell in a handbasket. But the SGA sort of encapsulated themselves and accelerated the ARC program. And when she left, there were 12 more ARCs getting ready for departure, even as the folks down on Earth basically went to hell. Now, Angus and Alicia, meanwhile, have been looking over the corrupted video files, and they create a program that filters out the corrupt frames and puts together a film clip that shows that Arc 3 was attacked by Arc 15 using weapons Arc 1 had never seen or heard of. And this puts a chill through everybody on the Arc 1 because they know that they too were attacked either by Arc 15 or one of the other Arcs for reasons they have no clue about. And as the episode is winding down, Ava has decided to go to engineering to get the Arc 3's FTL drive, because it would get them to Proxima within the year. But the FTL is the most valuable piece of equipment on the Arc 3, and therefore it has a little bit of security attached to it. So when she unplugs it, a self-destruct sequence starts, which nobody can hack to get the code to. And just as Ava and Bryce are getting ready to have a little end-of-the-world suckface, Lane decides to wake Trust up and get his backdoor code into the Arc 3, and it saves everyone on the Arc 3. And that's basically how they end the episode. They end the episode with Lane in the hibernation chamber with an awakened William Trust, who is confused as hell as to where he is and how he got there. But that is episode 7. And like episode 6, it both progresses the story very well and has flaws. The flaws in this episode are minor and can be looked past, because the overall episode is fairly decent. There's some minor, scientific issues, especially with the decompressed ship killing the crew of Arc 3. But the overall storyline is pretty good, and I don't really like the cliffhanger they left it on with the girl they found, because sure as hell she is going to wind up being someone they wind up whacking. Because while she and Felix were getting into the armory of the Arc 3, she managed to sneak a sidearm into the waistband of her pants. And if she were not up to something, she wouldn't need a gun. Overall, these 2 episodes were pretty good. I almost wish I had waited until this week's episode to sort of complete the story arc, because the way they ended episode 7 made it look like it was a 3-episode arc, no pun intended, with very little time in between each episode. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of time in between 7 and 8. because of the way they ended episode 7. So I'm really looking forward to episode 8 this week. This is a show that doesn't have me tearing my hair out at scenes a whole lot as the series has progressed, which I was doing in the early episodes. And as with episode 6, I am pleased with the character progression with some of the characters that I didn't like initially. And I find it interesting that they still have the little quirks that made them annoying at first, but the writers have dampened it down to the point where that's all it is. It's just a quirk. It's not the overriding feature of their character. And I hope it continues that way, because Annoying Girl is now Alicia. She's not that annoying anymore. Asshole is now Lane. He's still an asshole, but he's less of one. So we have a show that is actually entertaining and not so repugnantly incompetent and stupid as to drive away viewers, which is not something I can say about Gotham Knights, which is the next video I will be doing, because I do believe Gotham Knights was either on tonight or last night. I forget which, because I was busy doing this video and finding a new screen capture program because mine broke, which is why the Victoria Alonso video was just a picture of her ugly face. So look forward to the Gotham Knights episode 2 review next. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and comment down below. It's all appreciated. And I would like to thank everyone who watched the Top Gun Maverick Oscar video. That sailed right past 1,000, right past 2,000, sailed into the 3,000s, and is pushing towards 4,000 views. So I am humbly grateful for everyone who watched that one and commented. There were some good discussions with people over that one. And after the Gotham Knights video, I am hoping to get to RRR, which I doubt too many people have seen because it is a foreign language movie, but it has definitely made the rounds in certain parts of the creative community and seemed to be a mix of a historical fantasy and a Marvel movie. At least that's what it's been described to me as. And I'm looking forward to getting a look at that. Until next time, tschüss.